The night of the Arb. It was a night like any other in the village, where the heavy scent of frangipani flowers filled the air, and the stillness of the countryside was broken only by the occasional chirp of crickets. Nara had just finished her shift at the small local clinic and was walking home. The narrow dirt path lit only by the pale, flickering light of a few scattered lanterns. Her mother had warned her many times not to stay out late, especially during the moonless nights. "It's when the spirits are strongest," her mother had whispered in a voice thick with superstition. Nara, a modern woman, had always brushed off such warnings as the ramblings of the old. Tonight, however, something felt different. There was a strange heaviness in the air, a tension that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. As she neared the old banyan tree once said to be a home for restless spirits, she noticed the silence. The crickets had stopped. No birds, no wind, only the sound of her own footsteps echoing too loudly in the oppressive quiet. Suddenly, Nara heard a faint rustling from the tree's thick branches. She stopped, heart pounding, peering into the dark mass of roots and leaves. That's when she saw it, a glint, a shimmer, as though something wet and slimy was reflecting the faint light of the lanterns. Slowly, it descended from the tree. It wasn't human. A head, with tangled black hair matted with dirt and leaves, drifted down, floating in the air. Beneath it trailed a gruesome mass of organs, glistening intestines, a heart and liver, dangling like a grotesque tapestry beneath its disembodied face. Nara's breath hitched in her throat, her feet rooted to the ground in horror. It was an Arb. The story she had scoffed at as a child came flooding back. The creature, they said, was a woman cursed or possessed by dark magic. By day, she walked among the villagers, hiding her true form, but by night, she transformed, her head separating from her body, seeking out blood and flesh to sustain her twisted existence. Nara stumbled back, her mind racing. She had to run. She had to flee before the Arb noticed her, but her body refused to obey, her legs locked in place by terror. The Arb's sunken eyes were empty, hollow pits as it floated closer, its bloody, organ-filled maw dripping with unspeakable fluids. She could smell the stench of decay now, a rancid, foul odor that churned her stomach. Just as it seemed the Arb would reach her, it stopped, hovering a few feet away, the creature's head tilted, as if listening for something. Then, without warning, it turned away, its organs swaying grotesquely beneath it, and flew toward a nearby house, the house of old Mrs. Sofit. Nara's blood ran cold. Mrs. Sofit had been sick for weeks, bedridden and too weak to move. She lived alone, her children having moved to the city years ago. Nara realized, with a sinking horror, that the Arb was hunting the old woman. Gathering every ounce of strength, Nara ran. She sprinted down the narrow path, her sandals kicking up dust as she sped towards Mrs. Sofit's house. The door was ajar, creaking softly in the night breeze. Inside, the lantern light flickered weakly, casting long shadows on the walls. Nara burst into the room just as the Arb floated above Mrs. Sofit's frail, motionless body. The old woman's breath came in shallow, ragged gasps, her eyes fluttering in a dream-like haze, unaware of the horror looming above her. Without thinking, Nara grabbed a bundle of dried herbs hanging from the doorframe, a protection charm her mother had placed there years ago. She hurled it at the Arb, screaming a prayer she barely remembered, her voice trembling with fear. The Arb shrieked, a high-pitched, unnatural wail that pierced the night. Shaking the walls of the house, the creature recoiled, its organs writhing and twisting in the air as if caught in an invisible wind. For a moment, Nara thought it might flee, but then, its hollow eyes fixed on her, it lunged. Nara ducked, her heart pounding in her chest, as the Arb's cold, slimy intestines brushed against her arm. She scrambled toward the fireplace, grabbing a piece of burning wood. The flames crackled and hissed as she thrust it toward the creature, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The Arb recoiled again, shrieking louder, its form flickering as if caught between this world and the next, for what felt like an eternity. Nara stood her ground, holding the flame aloft, praying that the creature would retreat. And then, Just as suddenly as it had appeared, the arb vanished, its ghastly form dissolving into the night air, leaving behind only the lingering stench of decay. Nara collapsed to the floor, her body trembling with exhaustion and fear. Mrs. Sofit lay still, her breathing shallow but steady. The old woman had survived the night, but Nara knew the arb would return. It always came back for its prey. From that night on, Nara never walked alone after dark. The villagers began to whisper, their old fears rekindled by the sight of the charm-wrapped doors and the constant flicker of lanterns burning late into the night. Because in the heart of Cambodia, under the moonless sky, the arb still prowled, hungry and unseen, and once it had chosen its victim, it would stop at nothing until it fed. No one was truly safe, not even those who no longer believed in the old stories.